Hello, he said. I need a dress for my wife. It is her birthday tomorrow. Can you help me? He was an American customer who had entered the boutique where I was working. I understood every word. My heart started to beat fast. I tried to speak, but no words came out. I felt my face getting hot. I tried again. Yes, I can help, I said, but my voice was very low. The customer looked confused. Do you have something blue? My wife loves blue, he asked. I knew what he wanted. I knew where the blue dresses were, but I couldn't find the right words. I felt so embarrassed. Blue dresses, over there, I finally said, pointing to the dresses. My hands were shaking. The customer looked at me and then walked to the dresses. He seemed frustrated. I felt terrible. He picked a dress and came back. Is this a good size? He asked. I looked at the dress. I knew the size was good, but I couldn't explain. My mind was blank. Good size, I said, trying to smile. But my smile was weak. The customer sighed. He looked at his watch. He was in a hurry. I wanted to help him more. I wanted to speak clearly, but I couldn't. My English was stuck inside me. Just then, my colleague Sarah came over. She smiled at the customer. Hello, I can help you, she said. She spoke perfect English. She helped the customer with the dress. He looked relieved. I stood there, feeling useless. My eyes filled with tears. I felt small and ashamed. I watched Sarah and the customer. She talked easily. She helped him with confidence. He bought the dress and left, smiling. After he left, Sarah looked at me. Elena, are you okay? She asked. I nodded, but I was not okay. I felt like a failure. I decided right then. I must get better at speaking English. I could not stay like this. I needed help. I thought of my English teacher, Mrs. Smith. She was kind and patient. She would help me, I was sure. Lack of practice. The next day, I went to see Mrs. Smith, my English teacher. I felt nervous, but determined. I knew I needed help. Hello, Mrs. Smith, I said. I need to speak English better. Yesterday, I could not help a customer. I was so embarrassed. Mrs. Smith smiled kindly. Elena, don't worry. Many people have the same problem. Let's find out why you have trouble speaking English. We sat down together. Mrs. Smith asked me many questions. She wanted to understand my problem. Do you practice speaking English every day? She asked. I shook my head. No, I do not. I understand English well. I can read and listen, but I do not speak much. Mrs. Smith nodded. That is a common issue. Speaking a language needs practice. You must use English every day. Practice is very important. I felt a little better. I knew I could practice more. How can I practice, Mrs. Smith? I asked. She smiled again. There are many ways to practice. You can talk to yourself in English at home. You can read out loud. You can also find a language partner. I liked her ideas. Talk to myself, read out loud, I repeated. That sounds easy. I can do that. Mrs. Smith nodded. Yes, Elena. Start with simple things. Describe your day in English. Talk about your plans. It will help you a lot. I felt excited. I could see a way to improve. I will try that, Mrs. Smith. Thank you. She continued, Also, try to find someone to practice with, maybe a friend or a colleague. Practice with real people is very useful. I thought about it. I have a friend who speaks English. I can ask her to help me. Mrs. Smith looked pleased. That is a great idea. Remember, the more you practice, the better you will become. Do not be afraid to make mistakes. Fear or anxiety? Mrs. Smith then said, Let's talk about fear or anxiety. Many people feel nervous when they speak a new language. I nodded. Yes, I feel very nervous. My heart beats fast. I am afraid to make mistakes. Mrs. Smith smiled gently. That is normal, Elena, but you can learn to control your fear. Try to relax and breathe deeply before you speak. Practice talking in front of a mirror. It can help you feel more confident. I listened carefully. Breathe deeply. Talk in front of a mirror? I can try that. Yes, she said. Also, remember that making mistakes is okay. Everyone makes mistakes when they learn a new language. It is part of learning. Do not be too hard on yourself. I felt a bit better. I will try to remember that, Mrs. Smith. I will not be so afraid. Mrs. Smith nodded. Good. And if you feel very nervous, try to smile. Smiling can help you feel more relaxed. I smiled a little. I will try that too. Limited vocabulary. Next, Mrs. Smith asked, How is your vocabulary, Elena? Do you know many words in English? I shook my head. No, I know some words, but not many. Sometimes I want to say something, but I don't know the right words. Mrs. Smith nodded. A limited vocabulary can make speaking difficult, but you can improve your vocabulary. Try to learn a few new words every day. Use them in sentences. Write them down. Repeat them often. I felt hopeful. I can do that. I will learn new words every day. Mrs. Smith smiled. Good. Also, read books and watch movies in English. It can help you learn new words and see how they are used. I liked this idea. I love reading. I will read books in English, and I will watch movies too. Mrs. Smith looked pleased. That is a great plan, Elena. Remember, learning a language takes time and practice. Do not give up. You are doing great. I felt very encouraged. Thank you, Mrs. Smith. I will practice every day. I will learn new words. I will not be afraid to speak. Mrs. Smith smiled warmly. I believe in you, Elena. You can do it. Elena, she said, listening is very important. Good listening skills can help you understand and speak better. I nodded. Yes, Mrs. Smith. I want to improve my listening. How can I do that? Mrs. Smith smiled. There are several techniques. Let's start with some simple ones. Listening to English every day. First, she said, listen to English every day. You can listen to English songs, watch English movies, or listen to English podcasts. The more you listen, the better you will understand. I like this idea. I love music. I can listen to English songs every day. Mrs. Smith nodded. That is a great start. Try to listen actively. Focus on the words and sentences. Try to understand the meaning. I felt excited. I will do that, Mrs. Smith. I will listen to English every day, repeating what you hear. Mrs. Smith continued, another technique is to repeat what you hear. When you listen to songs or watch movies, pause and repeat the sentences. This will help you improve your pronunciation and understanding. I thought about it. Repeat what I hear? That sounds helpful. I can do that with my favorite songs. Mrs. Smith smiled. Yes, and you can also try to mimic the intonation and stress. This will help you sound more natural. I nodded. I will practice repeating and mimicking. Thank you, Mrs. Smith. Using subtitles. Also, she said, use subtitles when you watch movies or shows. First, watch with English subtitles. This will help you understand the words. Then, try watching without subtitles to test your listening skills. I liked this idea too. I often watch movies with subtitles in my language. I will try with English subtitles now. Mrs. Smith looked pleased. Good idea, Elena. It will help you a lot. Remember to be patient. Listening skills take time to improve. I felt more confident. I will practice listening every day. I will repeat what I hear and use English subtitles. Mrs. Smith smiled warmly. You are doing great, Elena. Keep practicing and you will see improvement. I left the classroom with a new plan. I would focus on listening to English every day. I felt determined and ready to practice, overcoming the speaking barrier. It has been a few months since I first asked Mrs. Smith for help with my English. Looking back, I am so proud of my progress. I want to share how I finally overcame the barrier of speaking English. I used to understand English well, but speaking was so hard for me. Now I can speak with confidence. Daily practice. The first thing that helped me was daily practice. I talked to myself in English every day. I described my day, my plans, and my feelings. I also read out loud from books and articles. This helped me get used to the sounds and rhythm of English. I learned to talk without fear of mistakes, finding a language partner. I asked my friend who speaks English to practice with me. We talked regularly. At first, I felt nervous, but my friend was patient and supportive. Talking to her helped me feel more comfortable speaking English in real conversations. Controlling my fear. I learned to control my fear and anxiety. I practiced breathing deeply and smiling before speaking. I also talked to myself in front of a mirror. This helped me build confidence. I reminded myself that making mistakes is part of learning. I stopped being so hard on myself. Building my vocabulary. I worked on expanding my vocabulary. Every day I learned a few new words and used them in sentences. I read books and watched movies in English, paying attention to new words and how they were used. I wrote down new words and repeated them often. This made it easier to express myself. This journey has taught me a lot about patience and persistence. Learning a language is not easy, but it is possible with dedication and support. To anyone who struggles with speaking English, I want to say, do not give up. Practice every day, control your fear, and believe in yourself. You can do it. If I could overcome this barrier, so can you. If you enjoyed this story and found it helpful, don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel. By subscribing, you won't miss out on more content like this that can help you improve your English skills. Hit the subscribe button below and turn on notifications so you're always updated. I also encourage you to leave a like and a comment on this video. Liking and commenting not only support the channel, but also encourage others to practice English and engage with the community. Your feedback and interaction are greatly appreciated. Thank you for watching and being part of our language learning journey. Let's continue learning and growing together.